I remember the date exactly. It was January 7th of 2021, because it was the day after the January 6th insurrection. And I remember just being like, what do you think about what happened yesterday? You know, like, and of course he like went completely sideways, saying like, oh, that's all just small potatoes for what's actually going on, you know, and they're actually controlling everything, and all that type of stuff, where it's just like, the end times prophecies. That was actually the last conversation we had before he passed away.
This is the Q Dropped podcast. Stories of relationships torn apart by QAnon. Just a quick reminder before we jump in that you can get an ad-free version of this episode and all future episodes, as well as bonus content from each episode on our Patreon. Many thanks to our existing patrons who make this show possible. If you want your ad-free episodes and you want to support the show, check out our Patreon in the link in our show notes. I'm a very fortunate person. And each time I sit down for another interview, I'm reminded of that fact. I'm in my 40s. My parents are in their 70s. I've had a good, long life with them. They took me traveling all over the world. They taught me to cook. They instilled values in me that have made me who I am today. They gave me an indescribably amazing childhood, filled with cousins, aunts, uncles, and grandparents, family, friends, dogs, parties, and adventures. They showered me with love and trusted me with my independence and didn't put any conditions on any of it. They loved me just as much when I was getting crappy grades in school as they did when I was acing it. They gave me friendship and were there equally at my lowest and at my highest. I look at everything they gave me and the many, many happy years I've had with them, and I feel nothing but fortunate. I'm lucky to have had them in my life the way I had them for as long as I have. I am privileged to still have them, both of them, alive and well and present. Today I've lost them to QAnon. I see them, I talk to them, I spend time with them, but it's not really them. They've been replaced with people I just don't recognize. But I think of my friend from childhood who lost her mother 15 years ago, and I feel like I can't complain about what's going on with my mother today. I think of my cousins who lost their mom, my beloved aunt, just before the pandemic, and I know that I'm lucky to have had a close relationship with them for most of my life. I've had so long with them, so much longer than so many other people have with their parents, and almost all of it has been wonderful. I am reminded of just how fortunate I am when I speak to my guests who are much younger than me, coping with losing their parents to QAnon. Sadly, today's guest, Brent Lee, lost his father shortly after he found out about his dad's QAnon-adjacent beliefs. I sat down to talk with Brent Lee, who is a podcaster and a YouTuber, just before Christmas. Brent Lee has had a life full of ups and downs, starting when he was a child.
Yeah, we definitely had some trouble when we were growing up, because they went through some hard times. So it was, I kind of got, a lot of it. I think most of the effects from that, I think, were sort of taken out on me. I was the oldest boy, so, a lot of it came back on me.
Brent Lee was raised in a deeply religious household.
I was homeschooled and everything. Like we went to church every single day. It was so much fun. Like, I talked to other people and they're like, oh yeah, my family's Christian. And I'm like, you don't get it. They're not Christian like I was raised. Like, trust me. Like, it was almost like borderline fanatical, religious, it was just, every day we were at church, everything that, they talked about had to be about Jesus. You have to say Jesus 20 times per day or whatever. That's like the rules, I don't know. It was just very, very oppressive as far as like the religion goes, you know. Calvary Chapel was like what it ended up being. Like I don't know if you're familiar. It's like the Chuck Smith, like they're like kind of like hippies, you know. It's like from the Jesus movement, and yeah, it was just like they don't care about how you dress and stuff, but they're very fundamentalist. You know, they seem like they're relaxed on like the face of it because they're like, oh, you can just wear whatever you want. But then when you get there, they're like, okay, but then we got all these like strict ass rules. You know, it's just like. Yeah, just quite oppressive, even though they're trying to pretend like they're not.
In fact, I was not familiar with Chuck Smith, so I had to look him up. Of course, he's an American pastor who became comfortably rich after founding the Calvary Chapel movement. At the height of his fame, the man vocally called the 9/11 tragedy a result of God's wrath for the LGBTQ plus community, as well as abortion. So, you know, just a stand-up dude manipulating faithful people with hateful rhetoric. But wait, there's more. In 1978, Pastor Chuckles wrote a book that promised that boomers would be the last generation on Earth, and the world would end in the 80s. And yeah, you know what? We may have seen our fair share of feathered bangs back then, but we all survived that, and the world is still doing just fine. As if all that wasn't enough, Pastor Smitth also removed his own son from his movement after his son had the nerve to question their beliefs. All around, a really stand-up dude. And if you didn't pick up on it, that was sarcasm. This is the church that Brent Lee grew up in. The church his mother adored, and the church his father followed. So much so that it led to a few issues between them.
Well, I lived with them for a long time. They actually kind of did kick me out for a bit, well, so I mean, they wouldn't let me. Like, I moved out with a girl, which was like the cardinal sin. You can't do that, and so they wouldn't let me move back in. So then I was sort of on the street for a bit, for about a year.
Despite the challenges he faced growing up, Brent Lee remembers those days with his father fondly.
We would go camping, and my dad was like a goofball, so he like loved to. He would go into the bushes and just wait. He would just sit there and wait. And then when we would start to like walk up, he would just start like and be like shaking the bushes. You know, we'd all freak out thinking there was like, because it didn't sound like a dog or anything normal. It sounded like a monster. Like there was a monster in the bushes. And yeah, he was just a whole lot of fun. Just a goofball. And yeah, everybody loved him. You know, he was just like... Always messing with everybody, and just, he's a big personality type of guy, you know.
Unlike so many other parents out there, when Brent Lee showed an interest in music, his father was fully on board.
He helped me record an album. You know, he like paid for us to play and record an album, so that was really cool.
Not so long ago, though, Brent Lee began to question the beliefs he was raised with.
Trump came out, and I was like, I was in a new relationship with the partner that I'm with right now. And, you know, we were talking, she's very politically minded. I didn't know anything about politics, honestly. I was super Christian, and I knew you had to be a Republican to be a Christian because that's the rules. That was always the house rules, you know. So I just sort of did it because of that, you know, because I was like, well, I'm a Christian, so I'm a conservative. And then, and I would always kind of, in my head, you know, find those arguments, just the top argument, like just whatever the basics are, right? Like I only knew what the basic talking points were for the right. I didn't really care about any of it. But it was just sort of like this automatic thing because everybody in America, I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but everybody has to pretend like they're an expert on fucking politics. Like that's just how we function down here. Like everybody knows everything. They've got all the facts. They know how complicated, you know, even with how complicated everything is, we all got to pretend like we know what we're talking about. But my partner, she's like a political science major. So she was like, she actually did know what she was talking about. And so when we would get into conversations about stuff, she just taught me a lot that I just didn't realize. And then Trump came out and, started running. And I was like, Christians are never going to go for this guy. This is insane. You know, they have to hate him. He's terrible, you know. And then, no, everybody started, like, defending him and, you know, just acting like the things he said he didn't say. And it was just so weird, like the way that they just were rationalizing every little thing he did and said. I was just like, this is I think I'm wrong about being a conservative. I think I made a mistake there. And then I was like, why am I conservative? And I was like, well, because I'm a Christian. And I was like, well, maybe I'm wrong about that too. So I just really started searching. And then once I tried to figure out if it was true or not, the dominoes just fell real quick. Then I called each one individually of my family and had a long conversation with them about it. And I don't know why. I just thought that it helped me because it just made it so everybody knew where I'm at. And it kind of kept all those awkward conversations to a minimum, But and they were irritated, I think, about it, and they thought I was wrong. But I at the end of the day, they were like, "What can I do?" He's like 30-something-year-old man. He can't can't tell him what he has to think.
Brent Lee waited until everyone else knew he'd lost his faith before telling his dad.
He was the last one I called because I didn't want to have that conversation because he's very, I don't know, he just can be difficult when it comes to those types of things. And he definitely was in that conversation. But I finally was just like, look, man, it doesn't actually add up,
His father seemed irritated with the news.
Yeah, I mean, he would always try to talk about it when I was on the phone and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, I think he did eventually start to avoid it too, because he kind of just knew that I wasn't, that we were just not going to find any common ground, really.
In recent years, the relationship between Brent Lee and his father would grow, though the two would only connect every few months.
We would talk like once every couple of months. And, we would have it would be a really long conversation. I think that was like why we almost knew, like, oh, I can't answer the phone. I can't answer the phone because we'll be there for like two fucking hours. I can't be doing that, so there was a long time in between. But when we finally like, okay, cool, I got like a good 3 hours I can sit on the phone. And it was always fun. It was always worth it.
It wasn't even 2 years ago that Brent Lee discovered his father was heading down the rabbit hole. Before that, everything was normal. Everyone's relationships were growing, past wounds were healing, and his father was even taking the pandemic seriously.
They both got vaccinated. They were cool with it. They started to get kind of like frustrated by like I think, just the right-wing talking points and all that stuff started to be like, okay, well, we shouldn't have to wear masks anymore and stuff like that, But they did at first, like they recognized that the disease was real and that it was a problem, and to do whatever you can to mitigate it. I don't know why the masks get people. It's like, they're controlling you. To do what? What? What for what? What are they controlling you to do? Like wear a piece of cloth on your face? So what? How is that controlling?
As the pandemic wore on, his father's point of view seemed to shift.
He really didn't like the masks. You could tell he was probably watching Tucker Carlson because my mom said that she cut out Fox News. She was like, you guys, we can't watch Fox anymore. She's like, I just can't have it on in the house. It just makes her anxious. She was like, it just makes my anxiety like go crazy. She's like, so we don't have that in the house. But I think he was sneaking it.
Finally, one day, Brent Lee's mom called him asking for help.
Well, okay, so my mom contacted me. She was like, and she knew that I had deconverted and that I was really skepticism and stuff like that, and kind of got almost obsessive about listening to logic type books over and over again. So she was like, maybe you should talk to your father because he's not. He's getting really into this Illuminati stuff. He was on his way, I would say, to heading towards Q. He hadn't quite made it to it yet, but he was in this because I don't think he doesn't use the internet. That's where I was just like, what the fuck? Where are you even getting this from? Like, who are you talking to? That does this. And I think what it ended up happening was he would do this homeless ministry where he would go, and that was the majority of all of his social interaction. Was talking to these folks, and they would feed them and and then hang out and let's have fun with them and stuff like that. And I think it was in those times because again, he never used the internet, so I think that was where he picked up on some of this stuff, because he did say he had one website that he would go to, and that was it. So it wasn't even, he wasn't on social media, he wasn't on any of those things. But And yeah, he just started really getting into this Illuminati controlling the world type thing, which I believe is like a big part of the QAnon thing, right?
Every conspiracy theory is.
I was gonna say,
None are excluded.
Yeah. Okay.
Brent Lee recognized some of his own past thinking in the new things his dad believed.
And it was interesting because I suffered from the same thing. When I was a Christian, I was super into the Alex Jones, and all that.
Brent Lee hoped he could tap into his knowledge of the conspiracy theories his dad believed to help pull him out of it.
The Illuminati conspiracy takes on so many different, there's so many different versions, because it sort of panders to different beliefs. So you have I want to say, I feel like I can map it down to 3 that I'm familiar with, right? So there's the first one that I used to believe, and this is the one that my dad was into, is the Bible prophecy one, right? Because if you look around and you're seeing reality the way it's happening and everything, none of the prophecies are actually coming true. So what the Illuminati conspiracy does is it makes it like it actually is happening, but it's all a secret. They're covering it up, man. The Antichrist, all this, the one world currency, the chip, all this stuff is actually happening, but they're covering it up, man. You can't see it. It's secret. Only I know about it. Okay, because I'm in the know. I got the inside track. And so that's the one that he finds compelling, because it panders to the beliefs that he feels like he needs to be true. He needs to have these beliefs be true. So it placates to that a lot. But the second one is racism. If you're a racist, you don't want to have to feel sorry for the people that you hate. Right? And who would that be? Well, Jewish people. Well, it just so happens that the 13 families of the Illuminati all just sort of happen to be Jewish. I know. It's crazy. It's so weird that it works that way, And he even said, some of the things that the support, funding both sides of wars, and that the Illuminati does that, right? Well, that is again a pandering to the racists, but he's not even into that. I don't really think that he's an anti-Semite. I don't think he likes a lot of Jewish people necessarily. He thinks they're wrong and killed Jesus and all that shit, But I don't think he's he's not like how the racists are. You know what I mean? It's just something that slipped in from that other version of that conspiracy. It slipped into his, with the Bible prophecy stuff. So it was interesting to see, to hear that, because I'm like, oh, that's the racist version of the Illuminati, conspiracy, and so it was interesting because, so I mean, and basically it's for them to say that the Jewish people didn't suffer. I mean, they suffered from the war, but the 6 million Jews that died in the Holocaust, that's all overblown. Those numbers are inflated. It's more like a couple thousand, maybe. Stuff like that, right? And then simultaneously, but they're rich and powerful and actually ruling the world, and they fund both sides of the wars. So really, they're responsible for all the wars. And so, see what I mean? And then you have this third version, and I'd argue this is probably the wackiest of the versions of this, is the reptilian humanoid. I can't even say it with a straight face. It's just so stupid. The David Icke, whole thing, where these shape-shifting reptilian humanoids, these lizard people that can shapeshift, are the Illuminati, right? And they all just, again, happen to have Jewish names, and they're the 13 families and all this and that and the other. But they work with the tall whites and the grays and all this other stuff, and they're looking for monatomic gold, which is really odd because gold is a base element, so it doesn't have more than one. Anyway, it's just, but they think it's a special kind of gold for whatever reason, because they don't understand how base elements work. But it's just so funny. Like, no, but this kind's monatomic. Like, all gold is monatomic. What are you talking, like, as one atom? Like, never mind. But but they think that's something really, really special. And from what I heard, I thought they said that the reptilians actually eat the gold. They don't use it to buy and sell and stuff, like they eat it. Now, maybe I'm wrong about that. I could be mistaken, but I could have sworn I read that in a David Icke thread of some sort.
Brent Lee's mom knew about his previous conspiratorial worldview.
Yeah, she called me. She was kind of concerned because he was sounding weird, when he was talking about things. And she was like, maybe you can have a conversation with him, because she knew that I used to be into that stuff. So, because she kind of like, when I was going through my whole Alex Jones phase, she was the one that kind of talked me out of it a couple times. Because like I remember like during the Boston bombers, when they were, I had this whole weird belief system about them not actually being the bombers, and the whole story was made up and all this stuff. And she like sat me down and was like, look, this doesn't make any sense. You're just believing stuff that's not real. The irony there is just so thick. But so I think she knew. She was like, you'd probably be a good person to talk to him because you've had these beliefs before and you came out of them. So maybe you can help kind of direct him out of this stuff. And it was crazy because I remember the date exactly. It was January 7th of 2021, because it was the day after the January 6th insurrection. And I remember just being like, what do you think about what happened yesterday? And of course he like went completely sideways, saying like, oh, that's all just small potatoes for what's actually going on, and they're actually controlling everything, and all that type of stuff. He kept on harping at the end times prophecies. That was one of my biggest arguments, where I was like, that lizard alien shapeshifters are at the end of this tunnel, right? That's like you're heading towards lizard aliens are the Illuminati. You get that, right? Like hoping that would like deter him.
Brent Lee doesn't believe his talk with his dad went very well.
I fucked it up, man. I did. I fucked it up because I should have been focused more on not being critical of the religion, which I feel like is the basis of why he's believing this stuff, right? Because it's placating to his beliefs. Like it's, he needs these end time prophecy things to be true. And here's a way that it like can be happening. And he can be observing current events and stuff and be kind of making these connections between current events and stuff, but it's really the Illuminati, covering stuff up, hiding things. It's all this weird, drawing connections to things that aren't actually connected. But if you make this narrative, that they're setting up a global world, a global currency and a global government and all that stuff, and they're doing it behind closed doors, and all these things are to get the people on board with that. That's sort of why these things are happening, and that's the narrative, that's the thread you're kind of spinning there. It gets you to this place where you can feel like the thing that you really feel like you need to believe is true, and not only that, it relates to the current events that are happening, right? And you have like the inside track on what's going on. And so, I feel like he kind of, but see, the problem was I kept going back and attacking the religion, and I shouldn't have done that. I should have been like, look, the Christianity stuff is fine. Like lots of people believe it, because you can be like a Christian and still think reasonably, and have critical thinking and stuff like that. And that's so but when you attack the religion like that, when I should have been attacking the conspiracy part and just being like, because I know that's something that most Christians, your average Christian doesn't believe that stuff, right? So I should have been dragging it back to, like, just be, it's okay to believe in your religion, but this stuff really, it doesn't have any evidence to support it. Like, but because I just, I wasn't thinking at the time. Well, when I was having that conversation, I was just sort of just spouting whatever came into my head, which is generally what I do. I didn't address it right. And I feel like it just made him shut down immediately and then go straight to defending the religion and forgetting all about the conversation we were having about the Illuminati. And so that was my mistake. And I was like, next time I'll keep my focus on the conspiracy stuff, and hopefully we can get him out that way. And and then a couple of months later, like before we had a chance to talk, he just he passed away.
I remember when I was young and my grandfather died. I think I was close to 10, maybe. We'd been camping and the campground got a call for us. This was, of course, at least 10 years before any of us had a mobile phone. Yes, I'm old. They told my mom her dad was dying, and we quickly packed up camp and raced home, which was only about a couple of hours away. When we arrived at my grandma's house smelling of pine needles and campfire, my mom put her hands on my shoulders and looked me in the eye. She said she didn't want me to go see my grandfather. She said that if I did, that's how I would always remember him. So I waited with my dad and my brother downstairs, not fully understanding what she meant. He died that same day, and a few days later we attended his funeral. There was an open casket, and again, my mom said she didn't want my brother and I to go look, or we would remember our grandfather forever like that. I listened to my mom, but it wasn't until I was much older that I really understood why. Why replace the last image of my grandfather I had in my head, of him laughing with his grandkids at a family gathering, with a memory of him suffering, or a memory of his lifeless body? When Brent Lee had talked to his dad about his conspiracy theories, he had no idea this would be his last conversation with his dad. He thought he had time to pull him out of the rabbit hole and bring him back to reality. He had no idea this would be his last major memory of his father.
And so it kind of sucks because it really taints your memories, so to speak, like the last, you want to remember him the way you, as the way, a good way, the way he actually was, which was a fun, loving, cool guy, but, he ended up going down this weird rabbit hole, and now it's like hard to separate that from my memories of him. And it was like at the last second, just before he passed away. So, and like I said, he was on the way to Q. And I even made a joke about it. I remember when we were talking, and I was like, "Are you into QAnon?" And he was like, "What's a QAnon?" I was like, "Nothing. No, never, just forget I said anything. Just don't even forget it." It's been tough, honestly. Yeah, it's kind of fucked with my just my image of him in my head. It's like it's weird because like the same thing's happening with my grandma. Like I always loved hanging out with my grandma. Now she's got, like you said, like dementia, and she's super old. She's like 95 or something. She's on her way to 100, and it's just, it kind of messes with your head because you're like, this is how I can't help thinking of this when I think of that person. You know what I mean? And like that's the image that comes up, and it's also because I'm so into this stuff. I do the podcasts and stuff like that. And skepticism is a thing that I'm really interested in. So that also contributes, I think, to being unable to separate my dad from how he was before. But it's like all I can really remember is the Illuminati thing, which is like one conversation at the very end, which is so weird. That should not matter at all. But it's the same way people talk about when they go and see, a loved one just before they pass away. And then it's like, it messes with their head because that's the way they remember them, is that there's last moments when that wasn't really them, in any meaningful way. That was just them leaving, this world. And that shouldn't be the way that you remember them. You should remember the good times, but it's weird how like the bad times tend to overshadow the good times in our minds,
But yeah, no, it's so, it was tough in that regard because we never really got to see, well, like most things, you never get to see the resolution that you're hoping for. I was like, shit, never got a chance.
Brent Lee's father had been suffering from cancer.
He had been like battling it for a while, but like we thought we got it, they did a surgery and removed it and everything. And I think he just didn't tell everybody, because it was just way too sudden. He must have been in pain and not telling anybody, because all of a sudden he just tripped and fell one day and then never got back up. And that was it. It wasn't even like a long process, no hospice or anything. It just, it's real fast. Like, man, I wish you would just say something. You don't have to be so tough. Just fucking tell us what's going on,
Brent Lee was able to see his father one last time before he passed, but they didn't talk much at all.
I did actually see him like after that conversation, but it was real brief. It was like at, I think it was a birthday party for one of my family. And so I did see him like briefly, like he was there, but we didn't really engage in that type of stuff. And it was odd because it was almost like he knew not to talk about that stuff when he's around like mixed company, because I think even within his set of people who are hyper-religious, and hyper-religious people basically just let other hyper-religious people just say whatever the fuck, comes out of their face. Like, they don't care half the time. They're just like, yeah, sure, the Lord totally told you that, like, whatever. Like, what are you supposed to say? He's like, no, the Lord didn't tell you that. Like, you can't do that. So you got to just let people say whatever weird thing they're going to say. And so, but I think he kind of figured out, like, even like with that being okay, this isn't, you know what I mean? Like this stuff, this Illuminati stuff, it freaks people out.
I asked Brent Lee what his father had said in that last conversation about the insurrection on January 6th.
It was, it was very much not about like saying that these people shouldn't have done what they did, and was very much in like saying that Trump didn't do anything wrong. It was like automatic on defense mode of, hey, he would say like my mom's name, like Mom and I, like listen to the whole, like we read every word of his speech and he didn't say anything about, attacking the Capitol. So I don't think he did anything wrong, really, and it was very much down that thread of just, we gotta rationalize away Trump's behavior, basically, and I feels like, after so long, after the whole 4 years of him being in there, it was just almost an automatic, it became so automatic for conservatives to just be like, oh, but, Trump is not the bad guy here. And it's just like automatic, their brain just switches to like defense mode of like, how can we rationalize around his crazy behavior? And so I think it was almost just that, like he's just so used to defending him that was the only place his mind would go about it. It was so weird. Like I knew he was a hardcore conservative. He's always been one. But I didn't, that's what really threw me off with my deconversion was like the fact that they weren't like, saying how bad he was or like, and when I would bring up stuff he said and they'd be like, wow, and they had this whole like weird like way of wiggling out of him ever doing anything wrong, according to evangelical Christianity, which is very, stringent, as far as like their fundamentalism and all that. So it was, but it was weird. Yeah. I didn't know he was that big of a Trump supporter. And that was what really worried me about the Q thing. Cause I was like, shit, he's like on his way to, thinking that they're eating baby faces or whatever the fuck. I don't know what they think. And then once it went from Trump to this whole Illuminati, and of course it's all Jewish people. I'm like, I'm trying to explain to him, like, this is Nazi propaganda, man. Like literally from the 30s. Like that's where you're getting this stuff.
Brent Lee had his suspicions about where his father had become radicalized.
I think it was something growing that we didn't know. Honestly, I think it was some like conversations that he was having at that one ministry, and I guarantee it's like some of those other. And what's sad? It probably wasn't the homeless people. You know what I mean? I think it was probably the other people in the ministry with the homeless people that were like spreading this stuff.
He also had his own theories about why his father was attracted to the QAnon worldview.
I think it's mental health, honestly. I think she could see that, and maybe from like the cancer or whatever, because like sometimes when people have cancer and things like that, they start to kind of like lose their grip on reality sometimes. It's funny because I always think of that. I don't know if you watched that show, Breaking Bad, but there's that one episode where he like goes after the fly, and the whole episode he's just trying to get this fly out of the bottom, and then Jesse or whatever is like, dude, you just got cancer. You're obsessing over a thing, dude. Like you're not. This doesn't matter, and you're just making it matter because you're not thinking right. And it was like that's what made me. I just was like, I feel like that was the same thing happening to him. That he's just obsessing about a thing that doesn't really matter, but he's just, he can't get his mind off of it. When he decides something is the way it is, it's very difficult to redirect that. I mean, I did, I snapped out of it, and he's very much like me, and that was why I had some confidence that maybe I could, because he tends to think like me. He seemed like he was a logical person. He's very well educated, went to the University of Florida, had a degree in business, and mostly his expertise was math. He was really good with math. And so I would imagine that he would be a very reasonable person. And for the most part, he would.
Brent Lee's own experiences in the past helped him to understand, at least a little bit, what had driven his father.
You would think that for the most part, like the belief, the religious belief is sort of the foundation. And then like the conspiracies are all just sort of scaffolding that's just using the foundations, and they could just build off of that, you know what I mean? And it can go anywhere. But he was really into Bible prophecy. And so it was the same thing that I had, the same problem I had, which was I loved, back when I was a Christian, I loved Bible prophecy. And you just don't see any of it happening, right? Like you don't see the signs. I mean, you see like what people say are the signs, but in your head you're like, yeah, but I mean that can be anything. But like, where's the one world government? Where's like the Antichrist coming up? Like, where's all this, the chips or whatever, all that type of shit? And you're not seeing it anywhere, right? But if it's all a secret and it's all being orchestrated by this nefarious group called the Illuminati, well then, hey, it all makes perfect sense, right? Because all these things are happening, we just don't know about it. And I think that was what it gave him, was that, that to lean back on is like, this is why the end times aren't actually coming true the way you are expecting them to.
Brent Lee's father's conspiratorial thinking would worry other members of his family before he passed on as well.
I'm pretty close with, some of my brothers, and we were talking about it, and yeah, they felt something was off too, and they didn't know how to talk to him about it. And they were actually telling me, like, you should talk to him. Because before that conversation happened, they were like, you like to do this, so you should talk to him. And I was like, all right, I definitely will, I just got to get the right time because it's going to take a while, But yeah, no, they definitely felt the same way, felt like something was off, and, definitely felt alienated. But it shows how much like these beliefs can affect a person, and change their behavior and change their relationships. And that's, that is something that we should address. And it is, not a game necessarily, but it's serious, it's something that is important, and it's, we need to address it.
Today, despite the loss of his father with unfinished business, Brent Lee is doing great.
I have my partner is very, very, very supportive. And she's great. And, I get, I have therapy and stuff like that.
But he's still worried about our inability as a species to have a shared reality.
Just the inability to get people to say this is what is actually true. That's freaky to me. Like, and we're seeing it right now. I think with this whole Twitter debacle that's going on. The Twitter files. But it's crazy because, I had to go through and do so much work to figure out what the fuck this was actually about. And I'd see all the right-wing stuff. Of course, all the right-wing stuff is just their super oversimplified narrative, like boiled down to even more simplicity, right? And then the left is like almost too complicated. Like we have to understand every goddamn thing, of like how this situation happened when it was actually happening, right? And then now that this dude, this billionaire is just like taking like screenshots basically of like this little stuff and then giving it to a journalist that's like, don't put it on your Substack. Now put it on my thing. And all these people are like obsessed with it. Like they're just all like feel vindicated that like, oh, hey, Twitter has been evil this whole time, and they do hate the conservatives. But the lack of truth is my point. And being able to go, look, hey, this is true, and here's how we know it's true, and getting other people to go, oh, okay, oh yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, you're right. That freaks me the fuck out. That we can't do that.
Still, Brent Lee has hope.
But thankfully, I think a lot of these kids, this younger generation, they are smart. They've grown up with the internet, and like we were saying, the red wave that didn't happen. There was more kids voting. I say kids, but like I don't know, but under 25, I guess, is a kid. But they outnumbered anybody over 65, like well over, as far as like the voting in the U.S. So that's promising, because they do seem to like be better at being able to figure this out and see through all the bullshit because they were raised with the internet, so they know everything's just a lot of smoke and mirrors that they have to get through. And so they're kind of like just used to that. And so getting to like the actual truth, if there are people that care about that sort of thing, they have the ability to do it, even with all the smoke and mirrors. People like me that have not grown up like necessarily with the internet until just recently, it's more difficult. Like I have to figure out like, oh shit, it really messed with me when the internet was new, and I believed in all these conspiracy theories and stuff. So, but that does give me a little bit of hope. I definitely have hope in society. I think that humans are awesome, amazing creatures, and we will figure this shit out eventually. We might have some bumps along the way, like as we always do, but I think eventually we'll get to it. We'll be all right.
Brent Lee's advice for anyone who has a parent down the QAnon rabbit hole is full of compassion.
I mean, I would say just, make sure to remember who they are. And that you do love them, and these beliefs are not necessarily them, even if they've kind of overtaken everything about them right now. Remember, hopefully this is a phase that they will snap out of at some point, and just try to love them, just be there for them, just love them. And I would say gently push back as much as you can, if you can. Like, let them know that you hear them and that, listen to what they're saying, and then gently push back. Almost do like the epistemology thing, the street epistemology, Anthony Magnabosco tactic. I think that works really well. What it does is it gets people to get themselves out of a thing. Because, like, people tend to listen to themselves more than they do other people. And so if you get them to kind of rationalize their way, or not rationalize, but, like, think their way out of a belief, it's much more reliable than them relying on you to get it out of them out of the belief. But yeah, it's very, very helpful. I would say make sure that you're not too combative with them. Just like let them know that you love them and everything, and then just like sort of gently question, but don't come outright. No, you're fucking stupid. Don't do that. That's not gonna. And nothing good will come of that. And stick with the conspiracy stuff. If they have a Christian belief and you're an atheist, don't even go to that. Just don't worry about that. We'll deal with that at some point later. Just stick with the one thing, one thing at a time.
Thank you so much to Brent Lee for sitting down with me and chatting. Some of the audio of him speaking in this episode was taken from one of his YouTube videos, which he filmed shortly after his conversation with his dad about conspiracy theories. You can check that out at the link in our show notes. A big thank you to our patrons who make this show possible. If you want an ad-free version of this episode, as well as bonus clips from every episode, sign up to be a patron at the link in our show notes. Next week, we're going to hear from Sam, who's still living with his QAnon mom. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube to be notified when that goes live. Thanks for listening.